Hi, and welcome to this week's Scottish Breakfast. Full Scottish. This is going to be a riot. I'm joined today by Alison Thewliss MP for Glasgow Central and by Ken McDonald, who is the founder of iScot magazine.
Thank you.
Hi. And we've got a number of topics that to talk about today. And we're starting with the G20 summit and what's come out of this.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've been able to keep up with what's been going on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's what has been really shocking for me, really, is to see all the world leaders cozying up to the head of Saudi Arabia, who has, by all reports, been implicated in someone's murder. So, and a grisly murder at that of a journalist. So I think it's quite shocking to see the kind of normalisation of him on the world stage, when all responsible world leaders really ought to be giving him as wide a berth as possible.
Yeah. I did see a photograph of him actually being ostracised, more or less. He's at the very end of the queue. But again, it is sad that the whole narrative of the meeting has been overtaken by this Khashoggi alleged murder, for want of a better word. So interesting times. Normally you wouldn't see anything at any other time other than a 10-second preview in the news, but it's headline news because of the Khashoggi incident, I would say. Yeah.
You know, and of course we've got Mr. Trump has made clear that he's got no intention of being involved with he's got no intention of complying with the Paris Agreement on climate change.
Yeah, it makes an interesting and yet bizarre time. I mean, we have our own Prime Minister. God knows what she's going to speak to these people, because everything's up in flux with the current situation regarding Brexit. Donald Trump just seems to be doing his own thing. The special arrangement apparently the special relationship between the UK and America in the past week has been told that it doesn't really exist. And then you have Putin and the Saudi Arabia situation. So it'll make a lovely series. I think it's just wonderful. I have no idea what's going to happen.
I know. The other thing that has happened as well is, of course, is that at this G20 summit is that China and America's agreed not to apply 25% tariffs on Chinese produce to give them an opportunity to talk further, to discuss further. Yeah.
I think it's been an interesting kind of way in which this has all emerged, because I was listening to some coverage of some American producers who are saying, we export to China, it's a big deal for us, if we can't do our part of this deal rather than just the imports, it really affects American business as well, which I don't think has really been widely enough talked about at all.
Yeah. Apart from the fact that the infrastructure for manufacturing is very heavy between China and the USA. So although China was traditionally famed for high volume, low tech, I mean, most of the Apple stuff is made there. I know there's some noises about bringing back production, but the infrastructure to build the factory, to build things like phones, are huge. The implications and ramifications are very, very high. I mean, even to build an LCD panel manufacturing plant could be as high as $1 billion. So I think Trump trumps a lot, but when it comes down to the actual practicalities of it, he doesn't give any thought about what's involved or the ramifications, and that's again another interesting thing to see how that pans out.
Aye, well, apparently regarding technology on that, American exports, America's proposing a ban on exporting AI intelligence.
Yeah, well, they always did. They always did have that. I mean, even if you bought any IBM equipment, within the contract, if you bought an IBM PC, it would specifically say you couldn't export it to Russia and you couldn't export it to China, specifically because they knew that these guys would strip it apart, analyse it and reverse engineer. So it's not new. I just think the variable in this factor is actually Donald Trump. Even he says things without actually talking to folk, and of course the fallout is just amazing to behold, frankly. I mean, it's really surreal. I just can't emphasise the fact that when we go back to the G20 and see what's actually happening, all these guys are in a state of bewilderment about what the hell is going to go on. And it's very difficult, as we spoke earlier on, to comprehend how to see how this thing pans out. But interesting times.
Well, finally, they have come out with an agreement. The G20 has been signed, and I have had an opportunity to read it this morning, and it contains clauses regarding financial transparency, coherence, level playing fields, gender equality, and I don't know how the people have signed up to this, and I don't really know the value of it, if anything's going to come from it.
Yeah, I mean, actions definitely speak louder than the words that are written in any kind of agreement here. So if you've got countries like Saudi Arabia, for example, committing to gender equality, what does that actually mean in practice, and how long will it actually take them to get there? I mean, they're only just allowing some women to go out and drive just now, never mind fully participate in the rest of society. So I think we have to see actually some progress on the ground with that before you can actually say, is it really much of a commitment?
Yeah.
Agreed, I think it's the situation whereby nobody wants to rock the boat, but what can you do within these parameters? And it's, again, with the variables, the wild cards thrown in there, it's interesting times.
Maybe the document itself has just been something to wave at the end of the summit.
Almost certainly, yeah.
I mean, there's wish lists and there's actually action lists. There's a difference between the two. Until I read it, I just really can't say. You know?
And we have other topics, of course, to cover. And what's been in the news this week has been France and actions in France. The yellow jackets, the high-vis vest.
It's really quite interesting because what started out as a general protest about an increase in fuel duty for diesel. Macron specifically wanted to try and reduce the kind of carbon footprint of what's happening in the centre of Paris. Has turned out to be hijacked by both left and right-wing organisations that are really genuinely upset that Macron doesn't really get the working class. And it's interesting to see it develop over a period of time where now we're rioting in the streets. So riots are not particularly, or that kind of action is not unusual in France, as you know from the farmers. They are quite prone to, speak their mind and drop tons of horsemen outside certain officials' premises. But it's really interesting to find out what is causing this and who's actually motivating the violence, which is rather sad to see, but it's not entirely unexpected.
Yeah, and since the very first time I went to France in the early 90s was there have always been protests anytime you go and visit, and they are more inclined to have demonstrations of this sort that can be long running, that can be whether it's air traffic controllers or
blocking ports,
ferry operators, whatever that happens to be. They are more inclined to do that, and I think they feel that they get something from it. So the size and scale of this, though, is quite something, and I think it's quite clever, I think, because in France you have to carry these yellow high-vis vests in your car if you travel, and I have 4 in my car because we were on holiday recently, but to choose something that everybody has already on their person that can then involve everybody in this, so apparently you see them sort of wedged up against people's windshields and things like that in the car to sort of show support and show solidarity. So it's been quite interesting in a way of bringing people into the rest of this movement and to actually engaging people, but as you're saying, the resort to violence is incredibly worrying, and you don't want to see that. You don't want to see people being caught up in that, because that takes it beyond just a kind of demonstration or a protest. That takes it into something far, far more sinister. But
the protests seem to be, located in the Champs Elysee, where the wealthy stores are. There's alleged riot and looting going on, and you can envisage the French Revolution all over again, where it's the poor against the rich and the elite, the political elite. And again, a lot of the people think that Macron is so distant from them that they feel there's no other option but to protest how badly they feel that they're being done in France. So again, interesting times.
Well, our method of protesting does not in any way emulate France's. We tend to be a lot more subdued,
more reserved.
Tutting the finger wagging at the best, and many people who've actually been in the restaurant, but they complain about it when asked how's the meal, usually say, it's fine, well, that kind of way brought up. I think it's a World War II thing, when you were never allowed to complain for fear of finding out that somebody that was serving you had lost somebody or whatever it is, and it just carries through. It's in the Scots psyche, but hopefully it'll change fairly soon.
What you're
not that we're actually going to start rioting this stuff, but we need to be a bit more vocal.
But it's interesting, there are people that have been on protest marches for many years on many different issues, but some of the people that are now coming along to independence marches, that their first ever protest, their first ever involvement in something like that, and it's quite new to a lot of people here.
It's invigorating, and the fact that it's fairly clean in the sense that nobody can actually get in to cause some bad. I mean, there's a few people trying to join, I think the last one in Edinburgh, but they were quickly weeded out. But other than that, no, we're fairly peaceful here, but we just don't get angry.
I know. Because of course Macron was in G20 while all of this was going on at home. He was conveniently not not there.
Well, yeah, it's noticeable by his absence, but that's just the way it goes, you know.
I mean, but it does seem to have gone up a level, because I saw a video myself of snipers being set up on the Champs Elysee.
Yeah, I think
So,
I didn't really hear that one, but I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. I know that when Macron did speak to the Saudi Arabia president and told him of his concern, but I think that was a contrived camera piece to send a message back home that he's being strong and what he's trying to do. But again, he's neglecting the people back home, hence the reason why they're rioting.
Sorry, I'm watching this clock here.
Just waiting, Theresa May coming up.
Theresa May, Theresa May is actually next on the agenda. Move on. Blink and you'll miss it. Was Theresa May's visit to Scotland this week? Bridge of Weir, Leather Factory. Yeah,
it was particularly cheeky, I think, to see her been out touring the country and doing all of this, when in fact all she's done is gone to the airport, got off the plane, gone to a very, very closed session in a factory, and then left again straight after. And you see the sort of contrast with the CNN report of doing vox pops with people in Glasgow city centre, and I'm quite interested in the ones that they couldn't publish because they had to bleep somebody out from it. But it's just so false, and any impression that she's getting, she must know that that's not a real impression of people's views.
I don't think she cares.
Must know that.
She doesn't care. I mean, she's in power. It's going back to what you're going to do about it. The BBC, the state broadcaster, is a state broadcaster. I mean, out of the 13 governors it has, I think 11 are chosen by the government of the day, and the head of the governors has to be chosen or approved by the Queen. So this is the state talking about the state to the general public. They will not do anything to hold Theresa May to account, and when the National, God bless them, tried to get in to hold her to account, flat refused. And that in a sense just tells you a lot of things. One is that we're impotent here in Scotland to actually do anything, and why new media is actually quite important in actual fact. And secondly is that we're treated with contempt at every turn, and it's about time that our own government started to put a bit of pressure on and start being a bit more vocal and visual about what we need to say to these people, because generally people down south don't know what's going on here. They have no idea. Yeah,
and it certainly seemed that it was very, very chosen few that got to go in and do the interviews as well. It wasn't just the National that was frozen out. I think Channel 4, their interviewer was frozen out as well, because he's been asking some good and difficult questions, and CNN themselves were sort of reporting from outside the factory, hence the report that they produced. But I think it is quite worrying to have that level of control of the message when the reality on the ground is entirely different to what she's projecting.
I mean, the BBC is a state broadcaster, as we said earlier on. The fact is that they just do what they're asked to do, and they're not going to confront the people that actually fund them. And although we as Joe Public fund through our taxes and through the licence fee, it's actually the government that pays money directly to them. So therefore, every so often when you hear an MP saying, I think we should consider the idea of the BBC being privately funded, this is just a shot across the bows to say, you guys are getting too close to what we're trying to do. Just get back in line, and we need an alternative. We really need an alternative, and God bless CNN. And RT actually broadcast something the other day there. They get slagged off all the time, but if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't find out half the stuff that was going on too.
I mean, I think Brexit is what's really emphasised to us the dichotomy, the difference between the reality of what we're looking at and what's being presented to us.
And you see that with the debates as they're being presented as well between Corbyn and May, that it's this kind of, we're going to have these two leaders. Essentially, you're having two people debating the same thing. There's not much of a debate here.
Absolutely pointless.
But they want to close it down. Corbyn, I understand, saying today he doesn't want any kind of questions from a studio audience or anything like that. You go, well, what's the point? What is the point? I mean, you get this every Wednesday at PMQs, you get them debating one another. Why put them in a studio in front of people who can't ask questions to debate something that they pretty well agree on, although she's a Remainer advocating Leave and he's a Leaver advocating Remain, but essentially they've arrived at the same position here with no contributions from any other alternative angles to this debate. It's an absolute scandal.
But the fact that the mainstream media are not even complaining about it, it's a tut-tut or a finger wag, but nobody's getting really angry about what's happening about our media. It's absolutely appalling. Nicola Sturgeon should be there. at least to give an alternative argument for the Remainers, and certainly to say that Scotland voted 62% to stay. You just can't dismiss it as being some kind of region. I mean, is it Caroline Knox came away with a comment about the power that Scotland, Lincolnshire County Council would not get. I mean, Lincolnshire County Council was not a signatory to the Act of Union, but having said that, the narrative is being normalised that Scotland being talked down is normal, it's to be expected, and therefore nobody will. They're all desensitised to this stuff. We need to get angry about what's going on there. We need to take some kind of concerted action. I don't advocate violence in any shape or form, but we need to start getting a bit more aware to the fact that we can't constantly keep being a punch bag for the London-based mainstream media.
Yeah. It was interesting that for all the debate that we'd had about the power grab and the questions we'd asked and the things we tried to raise in the media and with ministers, nothing actually got any attention until we did the walkout.
Yeah.
Because they couldn't ignore that. You couldn't ignore 35 MPs leaving a building and going out in front of the world's media.
Well, that works.
And it worked.
Yeah.
But I don't know, it obviously loses a bit of its currency if you do that every week, but it shows just how little that we are listened to until something happens to flip that over.
Well, you saw the comment, I think, the other day there about 200 billion was the revenue levels that would be lost if we had a zero-deal Brexit. It's equivalent, apparently the quote was equivalent of Scotland coming out of the United Kingdom. So you can see now that the level of money that Scotland has, it's not the case that we've been heavily subsidised, it's the reverse, and we have been doing this since quite a few, possibly centuries. And therefore it makes sense to demonise Scotland as being highly subsidised, misinformation, and having a very strong London-based media that keeps us quiet, along with a few people like Mr. Fluffy, shall we say, for want of a better word, keeping us in our place. So it's about time that we get above ourselves and started being a bit more vocal, started supporting a bit more of our own Scottish media and getting angry to the sense of looking for change and making a change happen. Again, we need to stop Scotland being a punch bag.
I mean, this Brexit deal, many people are actually saying it's putting us, Britain, in a worse, on the whole, in a worse position. Well. Yeah. Than it would be in the EU, insofar as it no longer has its get-out clause. I don't think it's, I'm not sure, maybe you could fill me in, it's not able to make its own trade deals.
For a lot of things we will be obliged to take the rules from the EU in order to do any trade with them, but we won't have any say on these. So it's, at the moment, for a lot of things, for financial services, for example, Britain's very much involved in making those rules and setting those rules and working in the background to do all of that. Yeah. After Brexit, we'll have to come out. We'll have to still abide by rules if we want to have any kind of to and fro with financial transactions, which is a big thing both in Edinburgh and in Glasgow financial services. But we'll just be stuck with taking those rules, and it really is a very daft, false kind of situation, because they're saying, yes, we're going to be Britain, we're going to be out in the world, but actually, if we want anything to continue as it is, we're going to have to abide by what the EU wants anyway.
Absolute nonsense. I mean, during the Indiref, they were talking about sitting at the top table, being with the big players, but this exact opposite. We'll just
away from it.
and nobody in the media is actually asking these questions. What are we doing? What in heaven's name are we doing by giving away our biggest market than talking about dealing with New Zealand or whatever? Germany has more overseas contracts or commercial contracts than the UK does, and they're within the EU. So none of this makes sense. I mean, it's absolutely nonsense, but again, talking about normalisation of the media, we're all getting desensitised to it to such an extent that we just don't really care. We just want it overdone with, which is a problem for the possible Indiref too. Which, if people who are not particularly into politics, and I can assure you there's quite a few who just don't, digest it 24/7, 365, would be against it and Indiref too, because of the hassle they've gone through, because they just can't be bothered to understand the complexities of what's going on there. They need to make it their business to find out what's going on, but it's not a simple matter of walking out and we used to rule the world at one time, respect us, which it seems to be this is all it's down to, and xenophobia. I mean, I can't see anything. I can't see any upside to this. It really is quite frightening.
Yeah. And Theresa May's come out and said, the number one priority with all of this is to end freedom of movement. Yeah. But freedom of movement is a big part of our economy. Yeah. You've got people coming here to work, you've got people working in the NHS, you've got people setting up, having families, making their life here. Yeah. And if you end freedom of movement, all of that goes away. All of that is made so much harder. And I've got folk who are non-EU nationals who have an absolutely horrendous time with the Home Office. A horrendous time. They've got huge expense in filling in visa forms. They get knocked back. They've got a horrible process that they've got to go through just to live their lives and to be here. You've also got this minimum income threshold. So I've got a guy who's working, in a good job and has to do night shifts at a supermarket as well to try and to make that threshold.
But if you remember when Theresa May was minister, she was the one with the vans.
With the vans and everything else.
So I still think that narrative is carrying through to her.
It definitely is. But she is clearly wanting to apply this to all EU nationals as well, what she's doing, which is just horrendous.
And it's a number checking exercise. So at the end of the day, somebody has to say, okay, prove that we're actually doing what we said we were going to do. And this is the reason why you get these sad stories of people being asked to leave, families being split up. But again, we need to get angry, get motivated and work hard to get these people out of office, because certainly they're not doing us any favours. We can't see any upside, and I just despair at the fact that it's becoming normalised. That's just what I can't handle, is that people are beginning to accept it's just the way it is, and it's just fate, and
What's more kind of insidious from my point of view is this kind of seeds of division that they're sowing here. So there's putting EU nationals against non-EU nationals and us against all of them, and I think we have to do everything that we can do to try and resist that wherever we can, because it's not normal. We should be making everybody feel welcome. We should be accepting that people have a contribution to make, and we should be welcoming them. And there's also this kind of equation of skilled jobs being highly paid jobs, which again is not necessarily the case.
55 grand a year being the minimum threshold level is...
that counts out a huge swath of the population, and we need to kind of get real about that as well and say, actually, jobs that are skilled jobs are at all different pay levels. You don't get, it's not salary tied in that way. Wish that it was. I'm sure that lots of people who are paid more for the skilled jobs that they do, they don't get recognition for. But again, it's this kind of creeping division that she's putting into every different aspect of life.
I think she knows what she's doing. She's just playing to the balcony and the lowest common denominator. So let's see what happens. So 10th of December is when we'll find out.
Yes, exactly. So the current deal, as well as I understand it, we are rule takers. We'll be rule takers with no input, but there's also no legal protection for the UK within the deal that Theresa May is proposing at the minute to protect the UK. If UK rules and regulations are actually detrimental to the UK, there's no get out there at all.
But there's also no legal protection for Scottish law being overruled by effectively British law, they call it, or the English law, which was enshrined in, I believe, in the Act of Union, because we wouldn't be having access to the European Court of Justice. So that's an interesting challenge to find out what's going to happen then, because if Theresa keeps going the way she's going, I mean, it's lucky if we'll have a parliament in 5 years' time.
I mean, the vote in Parliament is due on the 10th of December.
10th, 11th, okay.
10th or 11th. Do you think, is it going to come through?
At the moment, because it is a deal that pleases nobody and doesn't please her own backbenchers, it doesn't please the Brexiteers, it doesn't please the Remainers, it doesn't please Labour, it doesn't please the DUP, it doesn't please the Lib Dems, and it certainly doesn't please us as a party. So you've got this perhaps tiny core of loyalists, Tory backbenchers, who will vote for it come what may because they want to feather their own nests, and nobody else. Which is wild, to have got a deal that manages to unite more people in Parliament than anything else against it is really quite a trick. So it doesn't feel at the moment as if it's got any potential of going through. But the interesting thing, I suppose, for me is what happens next, and nobody can tell you for sure what happens next.
I mean, I think this is just unprecedented. A political situation to be in that just makes no sense whatsoever. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to find out she had a Russian passport the way she's going on there, as if they're deliberately trying to undermine the economy of the United Kingdom and the health and well-being of the residents of the UK. It's just madness. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. You can't rationally analyse it because it doesn't make sense, but the fact of the media normalising this kind of makes it like as if they justify what she's doing. It's unforgivable. I mean, it really is the worst of the worst. And it's no exaggeration. When I speak to some folk, they're just like, what the hell's going on? We just really have no idea what's going to happen at the end of this period of time. But I think that people in Scotland should be seriously worried about their parliament. I think that's something to be seriously concerned about.
I mean, what do you think our options would be? possibly be?
I mean, the EU have said that they're not up for negotiating anything more. They're kind of done with us, and fair play to them actually, because the British government have been entirely unreasonable with what their red lines are. But if she wants to keep the red lines that she's got already, there's really nothing much more that they've said that they can do.
But it's rules. I mean, it's not as if it's negotiating, because you can't negotiate rules. These are the terms and conditions laid down. You either comply, you don't comply. They seem to think that they have some kind of special dispensation to negotiate beyond what the other members have. And this is against a falsehood. And it's not as if you're negotiating something, you've left.
Yeah.
You know, if you pay your money, you get this. You don't pay your money, you don't get it. That's it in its simplest form. And to protect some of the things that she's got, she's hoping she can fool the people into, I've got a good deal. There is no good deal. There is no deal. It's just you've left. These are the rules. These are the rules that don't apply to you when you leave.
Yeah, and the sort of fears that she's tried to stoke up, and some of our ministers have tried to stoke up about this being an option between her deal or no deal and chaos and catastrophe. Again, I don't buy, and I don't think the public are really buying that as well. There has to be something different, and the proposal the SNP have put ahead, saying stay in the single market, stay in the customs union, that will at least kind of mitigate against some of the worst of Brexit.
But even when she talks about that it's the vote of the people or the will of the people, but when you realise that most of the stuff that's coming out now was never explained at the time, it's only fair that people should have a vote again. And then the argument of, well, if you don't win that one, you're going to have another one. Well, no. You just want to vote on the basis of the information that's presented at you at the time. So similar to India Ref 1, shall we say, when a lot of the stuff that was promised never materialised. You need to be clear and exactly clear what's going to happen once you do vote, and neither of these things are going to happen.
Tactically, I'm not a politician. If she loses this vote on the 11th, where does she go from there?
There is a notion that she goes and tries to cobble something else together and bring it back in a week's time. There's also the thought that there could be a series of options, so there's a kind of cross-party amendment been tabled to talk about, we don't accept this deal and here's why. So if this gets passed by a majority in Parliament, is that then the option and what the government has to abide by? Parliament has said, we don't believe in your deal, this is what Parliament is specifically instructing you to do. Government, it's now over to you to go and do that. So if that gets passed, then that changes, I suppose, what's being asked for. But if it comes down to that deal no deal option, then I think that's where the government wants to try and drive it to. But where that ends up, I'm not quite sure at the moment yet. She may well bring it back. There's been all these kind of scare stories about Christmas being cancelled and everything else, which seems a wee bit much. But whatever it comes to, we want to get the best deal for Scotland out of this. And whatever Theresa May is offering at the moment is just not that.
There's nothing on the table for Scotland. It's just that you tag along with whatever we have, that's it. And it's just not good enough.
There was rumours of a Norway type deal maybe being put on the table. Would the EU now accept that at this stage as well? Yeah,
and that could well be an option. But whether or not that's an option that will stick, that will command support from everybody, and whether an option that's any kind of long-term legs to it, I don't know either.
I just remember during the India Ref, this arc of prosperity, which was Norway, Iceland and Ireland. I mean, Northern Ireland's now getting the special agreement with its neighbour. Norway, we're talking about the Norway model as being a preferred option, which was poo-pooed at the time of India Ref. And Iceland's doing wonderfully well, jailing its bankers who brought in the 2008 crash. So in a sense, everything that we're told about during India Ref 1 as being a horror story is now what these guys are looking for, to try and get them out of the brown stuff. And, we need to sit back, realise and understand that we're being played. We're actually being played. We need to get engaged. We need to up our game and just say we're not taking this anymore.
Well, it just seems to be much more overt than it's ever been in the past.
Yeah, but it's normalised. This is the thing we were saying earlier on. The whole narrative has been normalised that it doesn't frighten the horses. And when you suddenly realise that when Theresa May is talking to an audience, it's just rhetoric rubbish. It's just absolute nonsense. But nobody from the BBC and the ITV, to be fair, pick her up on this or are prepared to hold her to account. Because she just gets away with this repetitive nonsense all the time, which frankly just doesn't do any benefits to anybody. I mean, people are none the wiser. And I don't know whether she's being clever about it to try and appeal to the lowest common denominator, or whether she's just daft, but I know which one I would choose.
Well,
Oh,
Okay. She's not. I don't think she's daft. No.
she must be. I mean, she voted against. She wanted to remain in the European Union, and now she's going. I mean, you just can't trust somebody that changes their opinion like that unless she's got facts. And the facts for leaving the European Union for the United Kingdom are over the edge of a cliff. So it's not as if she's got new information and decides to change her mind, because who would do that? It does not make sense. This should not. We shouldn't just walk through this corridor blindly accepting what the UK government's doing to us, because it doesn't lead to a good place.
What it seems to me is that she has this kind of blind loyalty to the Tory party, and she now sees this as her duty to kind of carry this through and her responsibility.
Yeah.
And if you see it from that perspective, you can kind of get why she's getting up in the morning and keeping doing this, because she feels as though it's this sense of duty. The party don't seem to feel the same sense of duty or loyalty to her.
Yeah.
So I kind of wonder eventually some morning she's just going to go up and just go, no, I'm not going to today, I'm done with it.
I don't think she's that type. I just don't get it. No, I think she'll have to be pushed like Maggie was. But again, it's just bizarre. I've never seen it in my lifetime, this kind of level of crass stupidity and uncertainty. And certainly when the sterling's crashed 30%, I think, since she announced it, and we're not even an independent island nation yet. So God knows what's going to happen. I seriously fear for my grandchildren. I really do, and I'd like to try and see Scotland escape this whenever we can.
Another part of this agreement I need a wee bit clarification on is coastal state.
Yes.
What does that mean?
This is the great big buzzword, which they think is going to be very, very attractive to people. An independent coastal state. Oh, look at us on the world, we're an independent. Nobody calls themselves that, really. It's an absolute nonsense, but it is the latest kind of
red, white and blue Brexit.
Yes, it's the latest thing that they think is something exciting they can sell to people. It's just a buzzword, it's just jargon,
just a buzzword,
and it's pretty meaningless, really. And it's also, we talk about independence a lot, but when we talk about independence, we talk about interdependence and being part of a global world, about the kind of relationships we can build in our place in that. Their independent coastal state seems to be a small island that nobody else can get into or out of, and you're just stuck here, concern. Which is a concern. And I'm just not buying it. I think it is in their buzzword. Another thing to try and bring on the fishing industry and to talk to them about this. And it seems perfectly clear to just about everybody that all the way through this, from the Tories right back at the start and the origins of the CFP and signing up to the CFP, the fishermen have been screwed over every single time.
They're expendable.
As being expendable. It's been stated that their needs were expendable. And I would question whether Scotland, as an independent country, with fishing as a priority, would have negotiated different deals and made different choices in Europe.
I think they certainly would have done.
Rather than Britain using it as something to trade off. And there's also the extent to which Britain understands Europe and has played the game in Europe well enough to get what it wants for its people, rather than just saying we're Britain and we will get what we want regardless. They've not gone into things with a spirit of cooperation, a spirit of understanding.
Well, they've been used to gunboat diplomacy that actually brought the empire about, so they realise that getting their own way is always going to be primary England first. And as soon as somebody like the EU said no, you see in the mainstream media the papers saying that we're being threatened, we're being bullied, we're being intimidated. So the UK mindset, certainly as far as Westminster is concerned, are always used to having their own way. And sadly, they're now suddenly beginning to realise that you're not a major world power anymore. And how do you deal with that? And a lot of them are in denial, and I reckon that Theresa May is absolutely in denial.
I mean, Ireland has certainly changed its position on an island. I mean, regarding them being looked after.
They've been protected by the other 20-odd members, taking care of their interest. I mean, this is not the interest of the United Kingdom, this is the interest of the Conservative Party. All this stuff has been directed because of internal squabbles. I mean, starting from David Cameron onwards. And this is what's so unforgivable, is the fact that, again, as we said earlier, the narrative has been normalised. This is the kind of thing that happens. It doesn't happen this way. Nobody would commit hara-kari over an internal party politics, and this is effectively what we're doing now. I mean, just wait and you'll see that pharmaceuticals were already stockpiling for these. I mean, it's going back to like pre-war stuff. And how many railings are we going to have to cut, and pots and pans to get aluminium for keeping the car trade going, although I think our motor industry is going to be heavily decimated because of this. Supply chains are so important, and we're throwing it away.
And I think there's been over the piece a bit of a recognition that actually things are a bit more complicated and integrated than perhaps anybody realised that they were.
I'm not from journalism. My background was from manufacturing engineering, so I know quite a lot about integrated supply chains. And I remember speaking to a Japanese managing director of a company that was supplying parts to the UK. And he said, do you think they'll be silly enough to do this? And I said, I doubt it very much indeed if they will, because common sense will see the day. But his problem is that they have what's called just-in-time deliveries. They have certain amounts that come in. They don't have warehouses because they don't need to stock up lots of stuff. Everything just comes in a lorry, through on the line, and it's back out again. So lean, mean manufacturing. This is all gone now. This means warehouses, storage of items, it's more cost. It's a disaster. It's an absolute disaster.
Yep, and a real problem for food manufacturing, particularly, which can't hang around and wait in queues.
Well, especially if you've got food that has to, as you're saying, it can spoil quite easily, and even refrigerated produce, it's a problem. People, you need to wake up and realise that this is bad news.
And maybe for Ireland, it may. I mean, it's looking more like Northern Ireland is now going to have more in common with the rest of Ireland.
Yeah. Well, it's just a political construct, so I mean, effectively nothing will really change for them, but they will be able to compete directly with Scotland for inward investment. That's a problem. When you actually make one child a favourite child and everybody else is just going to make do, it's not right, it's not fair. I mean, Scotland should have the same set of circumstances as Northern Ireland, and Wales and England made their decisions, so I don't see any reason why they shouldn't can at least agree to making the border at between Scotland and England. But then again, the political ramifications are evident to see. It won't happen, and Scotland again is expendable. We can complain, but nothing will happen.
It's really stressful.
It's madness. You can't rationally understand why this stuff is where it is. We just have to deal with it.
Yes. We're moving on, guys. We're moving on. I think we've discussed debate, but we're looking at independent media, which is...
Going back to what we were saying earlier on about, not necessarily that independent media would be any better than mainstream media, but it's an alternative voice that may have the ability to get it out there that you wouldn't normally see in mainstream media. And I explained, I didn't know if I did this online, but I explained earlier the fact that the BBC in itself, being the state broadcaster, is funded by our hard-earned cash. And bear in mind that the money you pay, the £150, you've already had 20% off that pound, so it's more than £150 that the government's getting for contributing to that service. Most of the BBC is pretty good, but the news agenda is pretty much state broadcaster. So therefore we're paying money to the BBC in turn to come into our living rooms, spouting out propaganda against our country and our elected representatives, which is pretty bad. And therefore, we reckon if you split the 320 million down the middle, saying that 50% is pro-union, 50% is for independence, that's £160 million worth of cash that's going to the BBC to broadcast that stuff back into your TV room. So we don't have, other than the National, which is owned by obviously a multinational corporation, they've got business interests to make it happen. But for people that really want to see a true independent Scottish media, they have to fund it. But sadly, the biggest donations, I think, goes to one of our bloggers who gets something in the region of about 100,000, and that's 0.00006% of the money that we give to the other side. So Scots are actually funding a media that's against their own best interests, news-wise, and we don't fund ourselves, and possibly because there are a lot of bloggers who try to do their very best. I mean, they're not funded in a great deal of money, but what they do with little they have is phenomenal. And all I'm asking folk to do is to understand, if you want to see change, don't moan about the BBC if you fund them, but don't fund alternative media. At least give them a chance to try and do something different that enables somebody else to have a different point of view. Now, our strapline is for those of independent mind. It's nothing to do with independence, it's to allow you to think for yourself, for Robert Burns' lines. Think for yourself and don't just believe everything you hear in the news, and certainly not in the mainstream newspaper.
Can I just interrupt you now, because I think we've got a wee bit of a film too.
All right.
To actually show about.
Cool.
If we can get it lined up, guys.
Wherever you stand, get the fresh view of what's happening in Scotland with iScot. Celebrate everything about our country with intelligent, in-depth insight from lifestyle, culture to puzzles, and all the opinions you'll need. Whether it's digital or by post, subscribe now to iScot.
Oh, thank you. I didn't realise I was going to do that. Well, yeah, that advert was crowdfunded by over 650 friends of iScot magazine. We're really pleased. I mean, we couldn't fund that out of our budget ourselves, but we now have got the message out to beyond that kind of indie social media bubble. There are people who would like to, I'm sure, find out more what's going on in Scotland today, have an alternative viewpoint, and certainly a lot of these people, particularly the ones that probably tilted the balance in favour of staying in the United Kingdom, are people who don't get the news through social media. It's through the print form. And again, we don't have, other than the National, any alternative news source. And it's why it's important to actually have issues like iScot. Obviously, I've got an ulterior motive, but I believe I've been told it's a quality journal, and we've also been awarded the World Cup of Magazines for digital programmes, which was
is there?
Yes, we were there, but it was public vote. We had actually the Joe public voted. It was free to enter. We, unlike some other magazines that win awards based upon having to pay to enter and have a group of 5 or 6 people decide whether they won or not. We don't. We just have Joe Public, who to us it's superb and fantastic, and we would love to grow.
It's a very substantial.
It takes a lot of time to put together, yeah.
Yeah.
We have a very small staff, unpaid staff, that makes it happen, and we have some of the best journalists that write for us, so we're really pleased. But again, we're kind of Cinderella outfit, although we believe that we give value for money and we give alternative views. Now, again, I've asked people to decide for themselves whether they like what we do or what we don't do, but we're here to stay, and hopefully, again, we've just celebrated our 4th birthday yesterday.
That's a good
Happy birthday.
And we're going into our 5th year, so hopefully we might do an interview with yourself at some point, I'm sure. Yeah, it's important that we fund our own homegrown independent media, and there are many guys out there doing their level best to try and reach out to people, but we just don't get a fair crack of the whip money-wise. And I'm not saying that people are deliberately avoiding paying it, it's just that they need to know the importance of having your own media. At least some aligned to your own political persuasion, which in turn, can only be for the better.
I think as well, maybe the lack of service that Scotland gets from mainstream media has really particularly come to light as the SNP have risen, because what's happening here isn't being reflected.
No, but there's a reason.
All.
Yeah.
There's a reason why.
Yeah, but it's interesting chatting to some of the journalists, I suppose, once after 2015 when we were elected, and all these kind of London-based journalists are going, who are these guys? What are these guys all about? We don't know anything about them.
Yeah.
And you go, well, you haven't covered us, you haven't paid any attention to things that we've said as a party. Even our conferences wouldn't get necessarily the coverage of the Labour Party conference or the Conservative Party conference, despite us having more members now than the Conservatives across the UK. So I think there's been a big gap there in terms of where Scotland has sat. Scotland's been an afterthought, it's been forgotten about, and I would say perhaps too much focus has been put on politicians like Gordon Brown. So Gordon Brown gets trundled out, makes an announcement or something, and it gets picked up in all the media. Now, why is that? When other MPs or other politicians or MSPs or whoever they might be, retired or current or otherwise, might have things to say but aren't given that same voice, because it is assumed that because Gordon Brown was Scottish and a former Prime Minister, his view counts and is weighted far more than the voices of many others.
But you find that there's only 5 very wealthy people that own about 80% of the media, which is mainly in this London bubble. And given that the concept of independence, Scotland's independence, is a threat to the UK state, there's no way that they're going to give succour to Scotland by giving a fair crack at the whip balance-wise, unless they're really pushed into it. And even then it's minimalised, or there's issues with the microphone or the camera or something. The British state will not promote Scotland. we're too valuable to them to allow people to start thinking for themselves and to realise that they could possibly have a better alternative life if they just decided to vote for independence. So they will, at every stage, give us no help whatsoever. And a lot of these guys have mortgages. A lot of these guys are specifically asked to, frame a piece in a certain way. And I know that for a fact because a couple of journalists, pals of mine who are now freelancers, were specifically told. One particular request by a London-based newspaper to do an article on Alex Salman, he was told by the editor, the commissioning editor, make sure you get in the word, he's that smug you drink his own bathwater. He's specifically told to write that. And you think it's appalling, how can that? But it does. I mean, the politic reality is that's what happens. They have an agenda and they've got a specific agenda to make sure that the SNP gets snubbed at any time. So you can either accept it, we can either moan about it or do something about it. And we're doing something about it from a point of view. We're not an SNP mag, by the way, just to be clear, that we need to have an alternative voice and we need the people to help us get to where we need to be a fairly substantial powerhouse of media. I don't talk about iScot, I'm talking about all the other guys like yourselves as well that are trying to push forward and create that. But there will be no magic multimillionaire coming out of the woodwork suddenly spending X amount of millions to get a new broadcast channel or even a new medium. This is happening from grassroots. It has to be grassroots upwards. So if you're listening and you haven't bought magazines or subscribed to Broadcast Scotland, please consider it, because without you guys we don't exist, and you go back to what we had before.
We need a reflection of what's actually going on here rather than a media that's trying to
we need to get out of
form or warp.
We have a comfort zone that we feel nice and comfortable and cocooned in, and when something happens that kind of rattles that comfort zone, like suddenly your business moves out of the country because of Brexit, then you suddenly become focused about what do I need to do to bring that level of security back, and you can't wait until it's too late. We need to start fighting now to get a media that's worthy of Scotland.
Do you think any of these new media would ever come around into existence at all without the first 2014 independence referendum? Or do you think that?
Yeah, we were created before that. We started, before the referendum. We started in April before the September, and we felt that there was a dearth of good news outlets to do stuff. There's a lot of nice kind of cottagey things that are happening, but it gave the kind of wrong impression of being a bit kind of twee. And therefore, certainly for our magazine, it's the highest production values in the way that we envisage Scotland to be. It's very high quality. Scotland, there's lots of quality places to see and interesting stories, historical stories, but we never see that reflected in any of our media because most of it comes through a London lens.
I think certainly the referendum kicked off a lot of this stuff in a way that is different to Scotland from the rest of the UK, because we are more aware, I suppose, more conscious of media bias, more conscious of the stories that they tell us rather than the stories that we know to be true. So I think that independent media and that social media has really grown in size and scale since 2014, and I think it's grown in a slightly different way to the rest of the UK as well. That we are a bit more kind of able to bring people together to do this kind of thing ourselves, whether it be through funding or just knowing the right people to involve in it. And it's been interesting in looking at some of the issues that are reflected across the whole of the UK. So the work that I'd done in the two-child cap and the rape clause was well covered in Scotland. People in Scotland knew it was happening, were campaigning against it, were out at demos organised in some parts. But I should mention Brenna Jessie, who's been named one of the 30 under 30 young women in Scotland, fantastic young woman. But this has all been kind of self-organising because we know and we talk to one another, and we use the media channels that have grown up now in Scotland to talk about this. And in 2017, just prior to the general election, there was a petition about the two-child cap and the rape clause, which parliamentary petition runs UK-wide, and they do a kind of heat map of where the signatures are, and Scotland was glowing red hot, whereas the rest of the UK were just going, oh, is this happening? And the number of journalists I had coming to me, London-based journalists, going, oh, is this an issue? And I'm going, yes, it's definitely an issue. It's an issue I've talked about constantly for 2 years. Where have you been? That the Scottish media is more responsive, I think, and gets messages out, and that's both kind of through the national, which have been great on this, but also the new media, Broadcasting Scotland, who did a good documentary on the two-child cap and the rape clause, and other media sources as well. But we're more kind of responsive, we're more aware of issues as they come, and we get that message out to people, and that that kind of example of the campaign that I've been involved in just really demonstrates how well we're talking to one another about the things that matter.
And even the people in England, to be fair, I mean, they're denied access to Scottish media because it's presumed that there's nothing interested in going on there. So they are unfortunately brought up with this concept that I mean, you are heavily subsidised by us, and without us you'd be living in trees eating grass. It's really that bad a level of ignorance we've got from people down south arguing, what are you moaning about? You've got a really good deal from us. So therefore they're being denied access to the information of the rest of the UK. They'll probably know nothing about Northern Ireland's situation and probably don't care about it either. So
well, the sort of compartmentalisation of the BBC as well. So you've got this news where you are. So I don't, you get the big news, the important British news, then you go to the news where you are, and we all know the sketch.
Well, it's English news,
but we don't know in Scotland what happens in Wales. Wales don't know what's happening in Yorkshire. Yorkshire doesn't know what's happening in Northern Ireland, and none of us know what's happening in each of our own areas if it's not deemed to be your big national news. But
that's supposed to be the purpose of national news. It's not English national news, which it is, because it's always about English healthcare, England and Wales healthcare, transport, England and Wales. That's not, in my view, what it should be. It should be everybody within the United Kingdom is actually included within this. But this argument is given that you've got regional access to find out. Yeah, well, that's good, but somebody down south doesn't, and therefore this is why this is quite disappointing that they don't have an idea what's going on here. And I remember one Question Time, which was made by Menton in Scotland, which is a BBC Scotland production, so the budget comes from Scottish TV budgets, and the host at the time had said it was in Scotland, saying, look, we can't talk about I think it was the referendum in Scotland because we need the people in England to be brought into this as well. I've never seen that happen when it's anywhere else. They can talk about English issues for healthcare, for English situations, but never Scotland is given a look in. So all we'd ask for some kind of balance, that national news means United Kingdom national news rather than English national news. And if English people had got to see what happens in Scotland, they may have a different perception of what actually is going on, rather than see us as some kind of basket case, which has been brought up quite a few times on social media, which I find quite appalling. But they're all served as well. Yeah,
and it leads you to the situation as well where people are looking at Northern Ireland and going, well, what actually happens there? Why are they in the situation that they're in? Because that's not been something that has been discussed in the UK-wide media.
Just one wee comment about I feel this is a pain for me as a BBC weather map. I do this in some of the presentations I do, and there's a young lad who bravely swam around the United Kingdom, a young chap, lovely guy, and he said, you know what, Scotland's a lot bigger than you would think. And you wonder why he thought that Scotland was a lot bigger than he thought, so good old BBC weather map.
Another kind of gap that we seem to have is that we don't have an international outlook from our perspective. We're not looking at the world through Scottish eyes.
Well, we've asked for control of broadcasting, which has been denied, I believe, and that would be great because you could get an international perspective, but sadly you can't. You have to come under the banner of the umbrella of BBC London output. Because for obvious reasons, that once you start having broadcasting, control of broadcasting, we usually find that when any coups happen, they go for the TV stations and the press. So they know fine well that we cannot get above ourselves by having an international outlook. We have to be subservient to a national state. Yeah,
and this certainly is the ambition of the new BBC 9 that's been proposed, BBC Scotland channel. And I think time will tell whether or not that actually works, but the aim is to get feeds into the network news and the network of journalists the BBC has around the world, so they would get, if there's a conflict somewhere, they would get that correspondent reporting indirectly to that and trying to put a Scottish perspective on these things. And I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that, but they certainly are ambitious about what they're doing. Whether or not they get the funding that they need to do that properly remains to be seen.
My understanding about their funding is that there's a certain amount of robbing Peter to pay Paul. Is it, for the new channel? For the new channel?
They're certainly very hopeful about it, and I would like to give them the time and space to see that rather than try and cut the legs from under them from the get-go. But I think it needs to have the funding, it needs to have the commitment to actually make that work and to meet the ambitions that we all want it to meet, to have that kind of international perspective and that Scottish view in the world.
Just to be fair and reasonable is all. There's not much to ask, but sadly we don't seem to see that too much.
And it's a prime time.
9 o'clock?
Yeah, so the news will be at 9, which I should say my mum is very sceptical about because she wants to watch something else at 9 o'clock rather than the news. But I think they will be offering something slightly different, and there's a value to offering a slightly different slot. So Channel 4 has been very successful in running Channel 4 News at 7 rather than at 6. perhaps 9 will work out better for some people rather than others. But I think it's worth trying to make yourself that wee bit different, that wee bit unique when you're showing it up against everything else. And I am hopeful, I'm optimistic, I usually am about life, but I
don't think that's any sucker for people who would like to see a purely Scottish from a Scottish dimension. I mean, the BBC, I think, has lost a lot of credibility, certainly in the news department. My wife just loves the BBC, she loves all the programmes, she's not interested in politics, but having said that, they do wonderful programmes, but their news, the technical word I think is sucks. So.
Right. As I say, I don't know if the BBC has changed its modus operandi, or whether or not it's just the difference, the difference in our political situations now. It's just bringing it ever. Well,
it's politicised.
Ever more to light.
It can hardly be called independent when it's funded by the state. I mean, you don't shoot yourself in the foot by running stories that run against current government policy, or be too hard on them, because certainly that's a surefire way to losing finance. So I mean, being practical about it, I know they say that they are independent XYZ, but when you do have 11 out of 13 governors chosen by the Conservative Party, it's very difficult to argue the case that, I'm sure you're independent. They're not. They can't be, by the very fact that they're government chosen.
We're also encouraged not to investigate these things for ourselves. I mean, the appointment of the BBC governors by
the Tory Party.
The Tory Party is going to be on my case.
Well, who would they choose? They wouldn't choose all Labour guys, it's not, I mean, it's just use common sense. Just think, why would they do this? There's a reason for the reason why they do it, I mean, I suppose they'll ask them to report fairly, but just don't be too hypercritical of government policy, and that's why Theresa May gets away with a lot of stuff and nobody tackles that one. I mean, it just has to be said. It's not as if you're making this stuff up. It's appalling the level of news journalism we're getting from the London lens on our political parties, because they neglect Scotland, as we said earlier on. Plaid Cymru doesn't get a look in, and neither does the Northern Irish. I never hear anything about Northern Irish parties in Scotland. They have to just suddenly realise it's not all about England, and it seems to be because they have the vast majority of the population down there, but it isn't.
Was it the new Northern Ireland minister who wasn't aware of the sort of voting splits in Northern Ireland?
Yeah.
And the Brexit minister that didn't realise that Dover Cali was quite busy.
Yeah.
That's correct. I remember that.
You can't legislate against that.
And finally, we've got our final topic, which actually was yesterday was World AIDS Day.
Yeah.
And it was a Labour MP who, I'm sorry, the man's name is Lloyd Russell Moyles, who had spoken in Parliament about the fact that he's been living with HIV for the past decade.
Yeah, no, it's incredibly brave of him, incredibly moving of him to decide to do that in the way that he did it. And he's as English Labour MPs go, he's pretty good and speaks out quite strongly on a lot of the issues that I would share with him as well. And I think it just goes to show that while there's been huge progress made, there is still stigma out there. There is still an issue for lots of people who are living with the condition, and we need to sort of be mindful and be open about that. And if it encourages, by what he's done, for people to go forward for testing and for people to speak about their experiences, I think that's all to the good.
Yeah. It wasn't all that long ago, there was a programme on, I think it was ITV, where the crew actually refused to do their interview of a guy that was declared HIV, because at the time they felt that even touching the individual would be enough to contract the disease. Just ignorance at a very, very high level, but these were the early days. And now it's a case that can be contained, and a lot of work has been done on it, which is fantastic. And having seen the Freddie Mercury movie that was out the other day, there you suddenly realise that just had he, for one a bit of time, may have been able to give us some more wonderful music. But medicine changes all the time, and for some people they're unlucky. Tuberculosis used to be a big thing in Scotland. Now it's treated and probably eradicated near enough in Scotland. So education and time tends to make change.
I think it's been very heartening that Mr. Moyles has received so much support. I think that indicates a big change from what you're talking about.
Well, it's ignorance. I mean, the only thing to beat ignorance is education. We just need to educate people what developments have happened and what won't happen. I mean, it's ignorance that actually frightens people to take these developments, such as not broadcast a turn up in the studio because you've got a guy with HIV. And again, that's within the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So I wish the guy win.
Of course, Princess Diana did a lot of work.
She did,
to-
yeah,
to
and the things that she did
eradicate the
to
stigma.
beat that stigma were really important to people. And last year, I think it was, there was a huge exhibition in Westminster Hall, which is the kind of great big oldest part of the Parliament building, of a kind of blanket that had been, patchwork quilt that had been put together in memory of people who'd been lost to HIV/AIDS. And speaking to some of the people who were there sort of looking after the exhibition and telling you about it was incredibly moving, because they just knew so many people that had just disappeared from their lives because of it. So if we're now in a situation where that is less commonplace, that is huge progress, but we still need to keep talking about it, I feel. And Lloyd's contribution to this, I think, was really important, because it keeps it on the agenda. It makes sure that it is something that we talk about, that we acknowledge, and that we can try and help support people if they need that, and help them to live the fullest possible lives that they can.
And it also shows you the benefit of funding healthcare and research into healthcare, rather than nuclear submarines and big warships that we can't put planes on.
Yeah. Well, I think I'd like to thank you both for coming in today and talking to us. And I think that's us out of time. So I think also to like to thank people for watching, and hopefully they'll tune in again. Remember iScot there, you can get your subscription, and support our independent media, and keep a close eye on Parliament over the next wee while and see what's happening, because I don't know if we can actually keep up. Okay. Thanks.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.